Here are the 5 things every CISO should be doing right now. Hi, my name is Sunaina and I am a cybersecurity specialist. Now, I spend a lot of time with CISOs and with C-level execs talking about some kind of cybersecurity incident that has just occurred within the organization. And amongst all those conversations, there is one pattern that is consistent. Cyber incidents barely happen because organizations didn't have any controls. They had controls. They were following the standards. They were following the compliances. They were conducting security testing. However, the problem is that the cyber risks present within an organization are not understood at board level. And there's a number of reasons as to why this happens. So here are the 5 tips that I believe every CISO should be focusing on right now. We need to reflect into how vulnerability is reported to board level. If we're producing a vulnerability report, an incident report that has metrics such as this month we've discovered 5 high risk vulnerabilities on our servers and reporting that to the board level, that's not going to be understood. We need to become more strategic in how we report cyber metrics to the board. So instead of saying this month we've discovered 5 high vulnerabilities, for example, let's switch that and let's say this month we've discovered this many vulnerabilities. 2 of these vulnerabilities could have a potential impact on our payment system or have an impact on us onboarding customers, and it could affect the registration page, for example. And from that, we can assume we will be losing X amount of revenue. The biggest priority for boards is business resilience, reputation, and money. So if we can tackle the way we report to address the questions such as what vulnerabilities can actually stop operations, what vulnerabilities could have an impact on revenue. We should be reporting risks, not in cybersecurity jargon, but in board terminology, making sure that we're answering those questions. We have to remember that cybersecurity is always going to be the department that costs money. There is no direct link that demonstrates that if you invest in your cybersecurity by X amount, unlike if you invest in your developers, for example, or your engineers, you can say that in return, the customer gets a better product or service. The cybersecurity department is always going to be the costly department because of that reason. We do not see it as a revenue generating space. So what we have to do as cyber personnel is demonstrate that by investing in your cybersecurity, you are protecting the organization from having a major breach that could have a heavy impact on your financials and your business reputation. One of my previous roles as CISO would always highlight to the board that it's not about if our company is hacked, it's a matter of when. We need to strip away the fear of what could potentially happen by dumbing down on the things that we need to do to prevent it from happening. So, for instance, now with AI, if you're incorporating AI into making decisions within your organizations, the conversations that you should be having with your board level isn't necessarily about security, because as a CISO, that's your role. The conversations that you should be having with the board, that if this model was to behave unexpectedly, what are the true outcomes? And for that, the CISO doesn't necessarily have all the answers. That's why having those discussions with the C-level execs around the same table creates a better chance of you creating a business model that actually has actionable takeaways that everyone in the room can go ahead and implement within the separate teams. And with that being said, we also need to make sure that we're breaking down those organizational silos. So where cybersecurity is always on the corner of the room, start bringing those conversations around the center of the table and making sure those key personnel within the organization are also present. Thirdly, organizations that survive an incident are not necessarily the ones with the most controls, but the ones that rehearse the most failures. That is ultimately what creates business resiliency, and it ensures everybody around the table knows what their role is if an incident was to happen, how quickly an incident or vulnerability is detected, and how quickly we can recover from such incidents. So do we have a recovery plan in place? Do we have backups in place that we can revert to? Fourth is you need to be able to explain what those critical attack paths are within the organizations in very simple terminology to your CEO, for example. And if you're unable to do that, it's probably because you yourself don't know. And if you yourself don't know, it's because you haven't gone through a rigorous threat-based scenario methodology where you're looking at both the operational and the strategic scenarios of how an incident can happen within the organization and how it affects not only the network or the application, but also the business. So, what's at stake here? What data could potentially be compromised? How long could the system be down for? What is the impact on revenue? Those are the types of questions that we need to be answering when we're conducting any threat-based scenario. Fifth tip here is that sometimes in organizations, we get carried away with onboarding a bunch of tools and having a bunch of dashboards that just overcomplicate everything. Strip down and understand what is it that you're getting out of it, and are you using it in the most effective way? Now, we all create cyber risk registers within the organizations. Typically, what I've seen is that these risk registers stay within the cyber team. So, usually, the enterprise don't really know about it. I see cyber risk as being an enterprise risk. So, it is the CISO's role to make sure that it's organizational alignment of what those risks are. And your primary role shouldn't just be managing these fancy tools and dashboards. Now, with AI, the role that the CISO plays within the organization is definitely going to change and is already changing. It's not about the CISO providing technical guidance, it's about the CISO being risk translators to the board, making sure that they understand how to create a resilient architecture and providing strategies that actually work. If you're a CISO navigating AI or supply chain risks, I would love to know what your biggest bottlenecks are and the types of challenges you're seeing right now.